Welcome back to Book Club. Well, for this video, I thought we would talk about some of the works that were cited in Northanger Abbey. This is going to be of interest to some of you. It's going to be of no interest to others. And one of the reasons that I've organized these commentaries the way I have is so that you can pick and choose, watch the ones that are interesting to you, and gloss over the ones that contain information you're already familiar with or that holds no interest. So, when we come back. Okay, we're going to talk about the literature that is cited in Northanger Abbey. Occasionally in Austen's work, she will cite literature. She does it in Emma when Harriet Smith mentions that she had suggested that Mr. Martin read The Romance of the Forest, which is one of Anne Radcliffe's, by the way. Ordinarily, she does not, but Northanger Abbey is full of literary references. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I look at this is that the works she is citing date back to, other than Shakespeare, and it's okay to quote Shakespeare, other than Shakespeare, we're talking about works that go back 100 years earlier. She is speaking about books that were written in her great-grandparents' day, and she is speaking about them as works of contemporary interest and contemporary reading material. I found that very interesting and very unusual, too, because there was a vast amount of contemporary literature, but she does mention some contemporary works, but a great deal of what she is referencing is works that were written 100 years earlier, leading me to believe that books stayed popular for a much longer period of time back then than they do today. So let's start, and we're going to take these pretty much chronologically. The Beggars Petition. We're told that it took Catherine, 2 months to learn the Beggars Petition. I don't recall the exact length of time, but it was done to illustrate that she was pretty much an indolent student. The Beggars Petition was written by Thomas Moss in 1769, and it was a work that was popular as reading material for young children. But at 1769, we're talking about something that was 45 years old at the time that Austen had sold Northanger Abbey when it was Susan, and it was probably at least 30 years old when she began writing Northanger Abbey. Then the next one was The Fable of the Hare and Many Friends. That was by John Gay in 1727. So we're looking at something that's even older. And that, The Hare and Many Friends, it eventually sort of fell out of favor when the same story was taken up as one of Aesop's fables, and that version caught on. But The Hare and Many Friends was, again, a children's story, in this case a children's story that had been around for 80 years. Then we start quoting all of those quotes that a heroine needs. Let's see, to bear about the mockery of woe. That quote comes from Alexander Pope, and it was Elegy to the Memory of an Unfortunate Lady that was written in 1717. And it was written about a woman who apparently committed suicide for the sake of love. Whoa. Some of this stuff is a little on the grim side. Many a flower is born to blush unseen. That was from a poem called Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard by Thomas Gray in 1751. So that's 50 years old. And this was about the death of the poet Richard West in 1742. So even though it certainly, I've read the poem, it does sound like someone who is bemoaning the loss of their the loss of their loved one. It was about another man. Now, it could very well be that Richard West was the object of affections for Thomas Gray, but it was not the sort of thing one would have spoken about publicly. So I just found that very interesting. So perhaps this is a surprisingly modern reference. Many a flower is born, no, we just did that. Oh, it is a delightful task to teach the young idea how to shoot. That was from James Thompson, and it was in his poem called Summer, which was part of a series of poems that was written in 1728. Shakespeare, well, trifles light as air, and jealousy, we know immediately when we say jealousy, it's got to be Othello. The Poor Beetle, which we tread upon, that was Measure for Measure, and I had to look that one up because I did not know that one. And then, of course, Patience on a Monument is Twelfth Night. And fortunately, I don't have to shame myself by saying I had to look that one up. Let's see, what do we have? Oh, this is not exactly a literary quote, but we have in Austen's description of Mrs. Allen, she is saying, let's talk about Mrs. Allen, and so we can understand what it is in her character that will bring our heroine to all of the despair of a last volume. Last volume is what I wanted to talk about because these books were published. This is Persuasion. I don't remember where I stuck my Northanger Abbey. They were published in volumes. Even a book this small would have come out in 2 or 3 volumes. It was simply the way they published books at the time. And you would, one book would be actually 2 or 3 books. And I thought I would mention that because in a vacuum, bring her to despair in a last volume. What in the world does that mean? Well, that is what it means. Sir Charles Grandison. Now, this is a book that is mentioned a couple of times. When Austen speaks about hoping that Catherine, has not dreamed about Mr. Tilney before he's known to have dreamt about her, because you can't declare your love before the gentleman declares his, and it's referring to another author. That was Samuel Richardson. He was the author of the history of Sir Charles Grandison and also Pamela. And Pamela was a very popular book. Pamela came out in 1740. So we're looking at a book that came out 60 years earlier. It was an epistolary novel, letters back and forth. And that is the book. The book is nothing but cross letters, just as Austen's Lady Susan is. So it's clear that Samuel Richardson had a strong influence on her. Now, that whole quote about before the gentleman's love is declared was in The Rambler. The Rambler was a publication that came out between 1750 and 1752, so it was only out for 2 years. And it was sort of the successor to another publication, which is The Spectator. And she mentions The Spectator, too, publication 1711 to 1712. So it had come out 40 years earlier. These were sort of magazines, and it would be like a series of essays and writings from different authors on different subjects. Rambler was more detailed articles. Spectator was more superficial sort of articles. The history of Sir Charles Grandison, because we were speaking about that, that came out in 1750. And that, too, is an epistolary novel, letters back and forth. And it was written in response to Tom Jones, which is a very popular novel at the time, and Fielding wrote that. So Richardson, who wrote this, seemed to feel that all of the heroes of modern novels, which would have been novels, in the early 18th century, the heroes were not exactly good and noble characters. So he wrote Charles Grandison in response to that, and Charles Grandison is this good and noble hero who does the right thing, and so on and so forth. And Catherine mentions, now keep in mind, this is a story that's like 40 years old at the time. She mentions that her mother often reads Sir Charles Grandison, which again struck me as just unusual that her mother would pick up this book and read it again and again and again. But it serves to suggest that reading material was in short supply, even in households that had libraries. Let's see. She mentions Cecilia, that's a novel, Camilla also. And these were by Frances Burney, a female writer. She is the one who was married to the emigre. And John Thorpe says, well, as soon as I heard she was married to a Frenchman, I knew it would all be nonsense. And he kind of makes it sound like she just picked up a sailor off the boat or something. But in fact, her husband was an aristocrat who left France at the time of the Revolution, apparently, one step ahead of the headsman. Belinda was written by Maria Edgeworth, and it is Maria. So what we would read as Maria, because we are modern Americans and our cultural heritage has been influenced by people of Italian or Spanish descent who brought the name Maria into our language and our culture. No, in Regency England, it would have been Mariah, just as the name Sophia, as in Sophia Loren, would have been Sophia. That was how they pronounced it, period. So, if you want to read it properly, you see Maria, you think Mariah. You see Sophia, you think Sophia. Novels by women, and they were all basically, Gothic novels. Where is our... Yes, here it is. Okay. Anne Radcliffe's Udolpho. Most popular book of its time. Most popular writer of the time. Unbelievable. Yeah, I have not been able to get through this thing. I will read it. I will eventually just walk away. I come back. I have to start at the beginning because I can't remember what I've read, mostly because it's not very memorable. Anne Radcliffe survives in our cultural awareness today because Jane Austen mentioned her and or her works in a couple of her novels. Austen survives. Radcliffe is a footnote. Most popular author of her time. Dull as dirt. In fact, I'm surprised I have not gotten rid of this, but I can't bring myself to because of Northanger Abbey. It's just, I keep telling myself one of these days I am going to read through this whole thing. I have not yet been sufficiently bored or depressed to give that a try. So those are the works that are cited. Now, the importance of this is, if you'll notice, the earlier works, when she's quoting from romantic poems and romantic plays and Twelfth Night, Measure for Measure, Othello. It's not as if she's quoting, the comedies or, or Hamlet or something. Although she's not quoting Romeo and Juliet, I'll give her that. What Austen is trying to do with this literature is let us know what has influenced Catherine Morland's mind. And it is poems about a woman who commits suicide for love, or, all this death and despair in the poetry. And meanwhile, these are the novels. And we also have a lengthy list, I think it's 7 of the horrid Gothic novels, which were lurid, strong sexual undertones, which is probably why they were so popular at the time. This is the kind of reading that Catherine has done, and this is the kind of writing that Austen is mocking. This ridiculous, overblown, overdrawn, just, I cannot read Udolpho. I can't. The good characters are so good, and the bad characters are so evil, and there's nothing in between. And what Austen is doing with Northanger Abbey is giving us her version of a real, authentic, genuine hero and heroine and a real love story, not some wild, exotic fabrication that no one could relate to. What she is saying in Northanger Abbey is, this is what a real romance is. It's a young, confused girl who toddles off to Bath, meets a man, and she just sort of develops a crush on him, and that's real life. Catherine's real problems are very minor. No one is abducting her, taking her off somewhere. Most of her problems are all, in the space between her ears. She's fabricating them based on the fact that she's reading this crap. And in reality, Catherine's life is what a normal, it's a normal life story. Austen's trying to contrast the common, ordinary, everydayness of Catherine's experiences with the wild, oh, and we're off in the Pyrenees, and the evil Montoni has come to kidnap me, and she's basically saying this is ridiculous. This is utter fantasy. This might as well be Twilight. This might as well be a novel about vampires. And by the way, some of them were. Those horror novels, yes, many of them had a strong supernatural underpinnings. Radcliffe, I will say this for Radcliffe, dull as this stuff may be, when she sets up her novels, the things that may appear on the surface to be very supernatural, she ends up giving very ordinary, commonplace explanations for them. So she doesn't trail off into the Nosferatu stratosphere. If there is a tapestry that is moving, it's not the hand of a ghost. It turns out that somebody forgot to close the window. That's all. So that was positive. But the reading that Catherine is doing is affecting her take on the world. It's affecting the way she looks at her life, the way she looks at the people around her. And of course, eventually she decides this level is unhealthy. But there's this very charming scene as she is with Henry in the curricle approaching Northanger Abbey when he begins to construct a little Gothic fantasy for her. And he does something very Austen, which is, it's exaggerated. Well, there's a subterraneous passage leading from the mansion to the church, but 2 miles off. A 2-mile tunnel underground? How could you resist that adventure? Well, for starters, it would be a 40-minute walk. Well, it would take me 40 minutes, and I'm a pretty good walker. So, unless Catherine is a little mountain goat, it's going to take 40 minutes to walk 2 miles off. And you see the remains of some instrument of torture, nothing of interest but a hoard of diamonds. It's really strongly making fun of these works. And Austen was, in fact, mocking the daylights out of this stuff. Deservedly so, because in general, that stuff, well, it didn't survive, did it? We are not reading that. We are reading Austen. All right, so that should pretty much sum up the various little literary references. If you find it worthwhile to look any of these up, if you want to, look into it, you have all of the names of all of the authors and the works, and the dates of publication, so it should be a very easy matter for you to find them online and read through them if you want. On the other hand, if you happen to want to read Udolpho, leave me a note in the comment, give me your address. I will mail it to you, because I'm never going to finish this thing. All right, I will see you next time. And I think next time we are probably going to take a look at some of the very specific references Austen made to items that are no longer in ordinary use, items of fashion, or references, for example, that are not commonplace to us that would have been very commonplace to her contemporary readers. All right, let's take a look at our little slideshow of our beautiful little horizon scenes. Just calm down. I'm going to go over and pet a cat, grab a cup of coffee, and make another video for you. We'll see you later.
Mm-hmm.